always grab a piece of clay that you can grip in your hand without your fingers touching. Now this is going to be different for everybody. A lot of potters, like if you're making a set, will measure the weight of the clay that they're putting down. But you just want a piece that's big enough that you can hold it in one hand without your fingers touching over the top. If you go too small, especially when you're first learning, it's really hard for you to be able to center and throw, okay? Step number 2, wedge. Look, I already have clay on me. See, I did this on purpose. Black pants, black shoes. Just to prove a point. Okay. Step number 2 is wedge. Always wedge your clay. So we know it's to get out air pockets. Why else do we wedge? Do you remember?
Aligns the clay.
Yes, good. Is that what you were going to say too, Abby? Okay. It is to align the clay particles. When you're throwing on the wheel, all that clay is spinning in the center. If the clay particles aren't aligned, you're going to get bumps and wobbles that you can fix but are hard for you to fix. Okay. So this will actually make your life easier. Once you've wedged it, you want to tap it into a rough ball. So number 3, tap your clay into a rough ball. Okay, now for this next part, you're welcome to draw like a quick picture. You're welcome to write it down, whatever you need to. It is going to be a lot of notes, but what will happen is when you're working with your partner, they'll have the first half of class, and you'll be helping them by looking over your notes and reminding them of the steps. Then you're gonna switch and your partner will do the same for you. We're gonna do that for 2 days. So if you take terrible notes, you can't help your partner. No bueno, okay? Take good notes. All right, to begin, now that I have wedged it, it's in a rough ball, I'm gonna take and slam it down in the middle, okay? You wanna get it as close to the middle as possible, and you wanna have a good amount of force behind it. So if it sounds like this, it's not hard enough. I can pick that up with no problem, okay? You should, and if you ever need to restart, just tap it into a ball again, okay? You should be able to hear a good whack when you set it down. Now, what if it's not right in the middle? It's hard for me now to move it. That's okay. You can cut it off and put it back in the middle using your wire tool, okay? So try and get it roughly in the center. And make sure you can hear that good whack, okay? All right, and you shouldn't be able to push it around. All right, next step has 4 parts, which is COPS. We did this for vocab. Do you remember what it is? Center, open, pull, shake. Well done. So first step is centering. This is the most challenging part of pottery. And when you watch those very satisfying pottery videos, they make it look incredibly easy. It is not. It took me 3 weeks to learn how to center, and I almost quit ceramics. Okay? So just know if you're getting frustrated, you're extremely normal. It's very normal for you, okay? So in order to center, for this stage, you want to scoot in so your legs are touching the wheel. Okay, centering, you want your legs touching the side of the wheel. Number 2 part of centering is you want to make sure that you use enough water that the clay slides against your hand. So you'll notice this as I throw, I will use my sponge to put a little more water on all the time. My skin is very dry. It takes a lot of water for me. You might be fine with less water, but you need enough water that it slides against your hand. If it's piling up on your hand, or if it feels like a cat's tongue against you, okay, that means you need more water. And this type of clay, the B-Mix with Grog, can hold a lot of water without it collapsing, so you don't have to be nervous about using too much. On the flip side, if you're using so much water that it's just making slip, that's also a problem, okay? So the goal here is that you need to find enough water that it slides without just making mud out of your clay. Okay, now let's talk centering. There are 2 parts to centering. Number 1 is pressure from the side. Okay, pressure from the side. You can do your non-writing hand, or you can do both hands. Okay. So when you have pressure from the side, you want to lock your arms in against your body. Okay, if you have really long legs, you might be locking it against your legs. If you're like me and have short arms, you can lock it against your body. Okay, And then you're gonna be using your entire body weight to lean in against the clay. And you should be able to just get it to the center by doing that, okay? If I wanted to do it with one hand, it's my non-writing hand. I'm gonna take my palm and press it against the side till it's right in the middle. Now, second thing you need to do is have pressure from the top. So if I'm using both hands to push in from the side, I'm gonna use my thumbs to give pressure from the top. And that keeps it from getting too tall. If you only wanna use one hand from the side, the other hand is gonna karate chop the top. Okay, now if I don't have pressure from the top, if I only have pressure from the side, you're gonna start seeing it get really skinny and it's hard to control, okay? The pressure from the top makes it so that I can more easily control my clay and it stays in the middle. Now I'm gonna show you a couple of common problems and you can take notes on these or you can just remember it, but if you're trying to center and it looks like this, see how my hand is bumping? Okay, if you just leave your hand here, it's not gonna do anything. The trick is you cannot hurt the clay. If it comes off, you can re-wedge it and put it back on again. But if you're letting the clay be the boss of you, you're never gonna center, okay? So when you press from the side, I wanna lock my arm in place, push in, and find my sweet spot, and just stay there, and make the clay move around me, okay? So that is something I would write down. The clay should move around you. It shouldn't be pushing you around, okay? Lock your arms in, lean in, use your palm, find that sweet spot, stay there, okay, until the clay is centered. Now if, I'll put this really off. If you're having a hard time centering, sometimes you can actually close your eyes and it's easier, which sounds hokey, but it works. I can push in from the side, put my hand on top, and then as soon as I feel it smoothly sliding, I can take my hands off and I know it's centered, okay? So it should look like this, nicely centered in the middle, no major issues. If you're starting to get a really wide base, clean it off. Excess clay on top of your wheel makes it hard for you to center. Because let's say I had like a big, find some. Let's say I have like a big goopy piece of clay down here. Every time my hand goes over it, it's gonna bump up and down, okay? So I always, whenever I'm getting a lot of clay on there, take a second, use my sponge, and clean it off. So keep your wheel clean. All right, centering, second part, opening. This is where you make a well in the middle of your pot. So, opening. And again, I'm adding more water because it wasn't sliding very well. If your hands start to build up clay, use your bucket and just wipe them off. Because clay will attract clay. Okay, so to open, you're gonna cup your hands around the side. And then I'm gonna take both thumbs and just slide them towards the middle of my clay. So I feel like I'm right in the middle. Once I kind of find that sweet spot, and it looks like it's in the middle, so you can see there's kind of a little spot, and it looks like it's in the center, so I'm good. If I was off center, then it's gonna look like this, and I know that's not in the middle, because it's too lumpy. So I'm gonna re-center, push from the side, push from the top, try again. Slide my thumbs in, find the middle, check it. Does that look like it's in the center? We're good? Okay. So to open, now I use both my thumbs, and I'm gonna go from that spot and press down. Now if you have long fingernails, which remember I asked you to trim them, but if you can't, you can use a sponge here. You always wanna have your non-writing hand cupped on the outside to keep it even. But then I could use either both my thumbs or I could use my writing hand to press into the center. Okay, and now I've got a little well right in the middle. Now if you're in the back and you can't see this, feel free to come join up here. There's a couple spots around this side because you do need to be able to see. Okay, now here comes the fun part. So when, oh no, I have a needle tool. Can anybody see it? Pin tool. Cool. Oh, it's right. So checking the thickness at the bottom of your pot. So part of opening is checking how thick it is. So you're gonna put your pin tool down in the middle with your wheel stopped. I'm gonna slide my thumb down to the bottom and check how thick it is. Now ideally, I want it as thick as my pinky. This is a little thin. If it's too thin, when you cut it off, you're gonna cut through the bottom of your pot. Many tears will be shed, okay? So let's fix it. If it was like super deep, if it was as thick as my thumb, I would just keep going until I was at the right length or width. However, if I've gone too deep, I just cut my hands around it, take my thumbs from the side, and I make like a little dent. And now, I'm just gonna push that clay down. It makes very strange noises. I'm gonna push it down to the bottom and then smooth it out. And then if I check it again, now it's thick enough, okay? It's always better, and please do write this down, it is always better for you to have a little bit thicker at the bottom than too thin. Because you are gonna be trimming it, you're gonna be getting rid of extra clay on the bottom, and if it's too thin, you're gonna punch a hole through the bottom of your pot. So that ideally, you want it between 1/4 and 1/2 inch, which should sound familiar because that's what the main thickness is that we talk about with our hand build stuff, right? So you want it 1/4 to 1/2 inch. So pinky is ideal. If it's any thicker than your thumb, go a little deeper, okay? All right, and lastly for opening, I need to be able to fit my whole hand in here, and I can't right now. So I'm gonna take my thumbs, cut my hands around it, and I'm just gonna I'm gonna squeeze my thumbs towards the outside. And I'm not gonna go any deeper than I already have, because I know that's as deep as I want it. And now it's wide, so I can fit my whole hand in there. Okay? And now I have opened my plot. Now, pulling, this is my favorite. I'm very excited. So pulling is when it magically gets taller, okay? And to do that, I basically pinch the sides and pull up. Now this is where you may need a little extra water. So in your notes, make sure you have pulling as your step number 3. Okay, and you're pinching the sides and sliding your hands up. Now the trick with pulling is you don't actually have to pinch very hard. You just want to barely get a grip on your clay and then pinch and pull it up. Now there's 2 main ways that you can do this. If you have long fingers, you can take your hands, and I'm just pinching like this. So you can use your fingers like this, but it puts a lot of pressure on the end of your hand. So I like to use my knuckles against my thumbs. Okay, so my knuckles are gonna be on the outside, my thumbs are on the inside, and I'm just pinching and sliding up. And it gets a little taller, and I smooth the top. So, part of pulling, the first step is to pinch it. The second part of pulling is making sure that I still have control of it. So I can take my sponge, smooth out the top, if it got a little scheme on this. Okay, and if it's really wide, because sometimes when you pull it starts to look like this, okay, you can do what's called collaring in. So to collar in, and make sure my hands are wet, I just cup them around the side and slide them together. And now it's back in the middle. If it gets too wide and you keep trying to pull it, it's gonna start collapsing, which I'll show you in a minute. So you always want it to go back to the middle. So I'll pinch, make sure the top is nice, collar in, okay? Pinch, clean the top, collar in. Okay, when you're pulling, you want a lot of water, but if it starts to make a swimming pool on the bottom, soak it up. So I would write that down. If you ever are getting like a pool of water, what will happen is it will soak into the clay and make it really, really wet down at the base. You do not want that. If that happens, then it'll be really weak and it's more likely to crack. So every once in a while, you're gonna keep adding water to it, but if it builds up, just soak it up with your sponge and then squeeze your sponge up, okay? All right, now, that was one way to pull. This is you can do that. My fingers are not very long, so I can only make short pots that way. So generally the way that we pull is you're doing that same motion, but with my hands only on one side, okay? So, like we were pinching with our knuckles and our thumbs, now I'm gonna move both hands to one side. I'll have one hand in the middle, one hand on the outside, pinch them together, slide up. Okay, so I'll show you again. It's that same motion, but I've got one hand inside, one hand outside, pinch together, pull up. Okay. Now, the top is pretty thin. It's feeling about pinky width, which 1/4 inch is where I want it. If you have a thin top, don't pull it anymore up here. But I have a lot of clay at the bottom. If I pinch it out, I've got like an inch worth of clay down here. So what I'm gonna do is use my sponge, and I'm gonna make a little ring around the bottom, okay? Now what this does is next time when I go to pull, hand inside, hand outside. And I always kind of just lean them together because then they're not floating, it's easier to control. I can put my knuckle underneath this little ridge. And what will happen is when I go to pull up, then I can pull all that clay down at the bottom, up towards the top, and help it to get taller. Smooth color in. And I'll do it again. It's very satisfying. Okay, now your assignment, you need to create a cylinder like this, which just means it's a hollow, tall, cylindrical form, okay? You need to make one that is at least 4 inches tall, okay? Now, I will tell you, your pointer finger is just over 3. You can go a little further than that and you'd be at 4. So that's an easy way for you to tell, okay? If you can't get it tall enough, start over again. Okay, now last step is shaping. So to shape it, there's 2 things that I'm trying to do. Number 1 is I can like move the walls in and out to get a specific shape. But also down here at the bottom, do you see how there's more clay than I actually need? Okay, it kind of bows out a little bit. I want to get it skinnier so that it's easier for me to work with when I trim it. So trimming just means that after this is dry, I'm gonna flip it over and use my ribbon tools to scrape off some extra clay that I couldn't get on the wheel this direction, okay? So to make my life easier, I'm gonna take some extra clay off the bottom. So what is this tool? Do you remember? Potter's knife. Well done, guys. Thank you, Kelly. As you have been working, some of you have been using these, some of you have not, you're gonna want them for this, okay? The potter's knife has this lovely sharp end, and what I'm gonna do is brace my hand with my other arm, okay, because I never want one hand floating around, that's dangerous. I always rest it against my other arm. And I'm gonna decide how thick I want it. So I just want it to be even with the side of the pot. So while it's going kind of slowly, I'm gonna cut straight down into the clay till it touches the wheel head. Okay, once you touch the wheel, stop, cut into the side. So for those of you over here, all I did was slide it down till it touched the wheel. Then I'm gonna stop and cut straight through it, okay? Then I find that little cut, I leave the knife there, and let it run for a second. And it makes this super cute little coil thing, right? And now it's lovely and even. And if it's not, I can take that same tool, clean it up, and finish it off. And then as my last step for shaping, like if I wanted to make this into a bowl or something, which you can choose, like if you want to keep your thing, awesome, but you just have to pass it off to get a grade. But I can use a rib, start at the bottom, and gently pull it out towards me. And now I can shape my pot, which is the magical part of throwing. So clay is stretchier than you think it is. It can handle a lot of pressure. It's kind of exciting, right? And then if I'm using a rib, the nice thing is, it's not magical, I can just take and scrape this against it, and it's gonna even it out, get rid of any impurities. Now, do you see how it's kind of uneven on the top now? Okay, so I can take that sponge, do the same thing I did before. I'll just gently use the sponge, run it over the top, even it out, okay? All right, so last thing I'm gonna show you. If you leave too much clay at the bottom, it's gonna look like this. Okay, this is what you do not want. What I am gonna do is the first time you make a cylinder, I'm gonna cut it in half because I'm horrible and mean, okay? What we're looking for is something like this. It's okay if it's a little thicker at the bottom, but ideally you want it about the same all the way up and down, and it should be even all the way across the base. This is what you have to have in order to pass off on the wheel. If then you have some extra time, you want to make a bowl, a mug, whatever, great. However, this is all you have to get a grade. Okay? So, for example, if I wanted to take this and get a grade for it, I would cut it in half, slide it over, and now I can check it. Okay, so it would even all the way down. That's what you're looking for. Depressing, go fun. All right, any questions? Okay, all right, my friends, if you have a special request, I'm gonna sit over here and throw for another minute and I can show you how to do some different stuff. If you have things to work on, go ahead and head back to your seat and get those done. Make sure you have really good notes. Ready to go.